as our societies and our organizations and our NGOs and life becomes more digitized, it's really important to retain our humanness. And that's why I think that all NGOs need to become experienced and capable with design thinking methodologies. Design thinking is a human-centered approach to innovation that takes into account technology, the needs of people, and the possibilities and requirements for success of impact. At its heart, what design thinking does, it allows us to empathize with our end users. It allows us to see their world, to understand what they're feeling, to appreciate them as human beings, and to be able to communicate that understanding to them. Design thinking helps us ask the right questions when we're researching different technologies as part of our digital transformation strategies. We should not be asking questions like, how can my NGO use artificial intelligence? Or how can my NGO use a conference app? Or how can my NGO use a CRM? That's not the right question. And with human-centered design, it forces you to pose the question like, what problem is the technology solving for my end user? And when we think about that, it naturally helps us design and select the right technology to make the experience better for that end user, which in turn helps our organization create impact. Design thinking is a whole set of methodologies to help you really empathize with the end user. And there are many different techniques out there. Some of you may be familiar with an organization called IDEO.org. And Tim Brown, who is their CEO, is sort of credited with creating the whole field. So they're a really great resource, IDEO.org. Another set of methodologies comes from Luma. And it's one that I have been trained in over the last 10 years and that I use when I work with nonprofits that are considering digital transformation. And so the techniques are divided into 3 general areas. The first area is looking and observing. So this is really about collecting information and research from your end user, whether you are observing them, or you're interviewing them, or you're looking at data around them. So that's very important to collect that information about your end user as part of your digital transformation strategy. And the Luma Institute, as well as IDEO, provide you with a recipe of different techniques on how to do that. The next set of methodologies is under the understanding and analysis. So before you can actually get to the solutions, you really need to have a deep understanding of what the problem is. And sometimes, many times, we want to skip over the problem because it's really uncomfortable to sit with a problem. But if we skip over it, sometimes we solve for the wrong problem. So you really need to sit with the problem, do that deep analysis, and so that's a set of methodologies as well. And then finally comes what I think is the fun part. It's about prototyping, creation, ideation. So you're coming up with many new ideas. And there's lots of different, and these techniques are kind of fun to come up with different ideas. And then ideas alone, aren't that useful. You have to sort of synthesize them into a prototype so you can communicate those to other people. And then you need to actually create some sort of pilot so you can test this prototype. And it's generally something very simple, very low cost, and so you can get some feedback from users and iterate on it and make it better. So design thinking kind of boils down into these 3 areas: looking and observing, understanding, and making prototyping and ideation. So if your organization wants to use human-centered design, those are 2 great resources, but applying them in your organization needs to develop an innovation mindset or innovation culture or an innovation way of working. And that includes a couple of things. It includes really being observant and really listening. Too often we just don't listen to each other, to our families, because we're all so busy. It's kind of slowing down and actually listening to people and creating that empathy. The next thing, we have to be open and accepting to new ideas. We can't say things like, that doesn't work, right? We don't have the budget for that. Well, why should we do it differently? We've always done it this way. We have to be open to change and open to new ideas. We also have to have flexibility and adaptability. We can't be so set in our ways that we won't change. And finally, we have to have a learning mindset to things, and we have to embrace failure. Because often when we're prototyping something, we haven't spent a whole lot of time making it, and we're testing it, and we might not get it right the first time. Most of the time we don't get it right, and that can be seen as a failure. So let me give you a few different ways to think about failure to help you move it into learning. So the first thing is that people tend to react to failures or mistakes in 3 different ways. The first way is that they just ignore the failure. What mistake? There's nothing wrong. And they just go on. The second is that they blame others. It's your fault. You messed up. It's all your fault, and you did it wrong. And the third way is that they blame themselves. And they start to go inward and they say, I made a mistake. It's me. I'm terrible. I should never exist because I made a mistake. All right. If that's you, and that's most of us, we need to let it go. And here's a technique to help you do that. It's called the failure bow. Now, if you've ever watched Olympic gymnasts, they do this all the time. When they're getting off the trampoline after making a little bit of a mistake, they will jump off the trampoline and raise their hands. That's the failure bow. So let me demonstrate to you how to do it. So you raise your hands in the air, you look like a submissive dog, and you say, I failed. Now I can learn.